Presentation. I'm going to explain a little bit about the famous Black Watch Mutiny. Now, some of these gentlemen are going to be a bit more detail about this. We're going to first of all explain a little history to the background. Then I've got a Black Watch soldier here who's going to tell his little story. Then I'm going to show you some of the bits and pieces that a soldier would have had in the 18th century. And after it, if you'd like to wander over and have a chat to us, have a closer look at some of the things we have, only too happy to talk to you. But without any further ado, I'm going to hand you off to our fearsome Black Watch. Oh, sorry, is it officer? Oh, sorry, I'm in trouble now. I'm going to hand you over to the captain, who's going to explain a little bit about the history of what happened to the regiment.
Just a little bit background. The date is 17th and 18th of May, 1743. So what's today's date? 17th of May. The place, Highgate Common, London. The regiment, over 100 of the regiment, started their walk back north to Scotland. Why? I will explain that shortly. But they think they've been well and truly deceived. Over the next few days they made good time and were nearing the woods at Northampton. General Blakeney, who held command in the area, immediately dispatched Captain Ball, which is me, of General Wade's Regiment of Horse. That's the 2nd Queen's Regiment of Dragoon Guards. After discovering the 100 men of the regiment hiding in the woods, Captain Ball and General Blakeney surrounded the woods. Captain Ball was designated to confer with the Black Watch senior officer and demanded they lay down their arms. They positively refused, declaring they would rather be cut to pieces than surrender unless they were given a written free pardon by the captain's own hand. I, the captain, said I'd do all I could to assist, and I then asked to be escorted out of the woods by 2 privates, who were actually brothers. On returning to the troops, I told the 2 men they would get a free pardon. The rest of the Black Watch thought it would apply to them, so they came out of the woods and blew the gunpowder out of their musket flashbangs. The government, though, had different ideas and said they still had to be punished, as this gross breach of military discipline could not be overlooked. So a general court-martial was set to be held on the 8th of June 1743. Okay.
So, why did the Black Watch decide they didn't wish to fight? Well, the best thing to do is to ask a Black Watch soldier. We'll get him to tell his side of the story.
My name is Private Farquhar Shaw of Rothiemurcus. I was originally a member of the independent Highland companies, but in 1739 these companies were amalgamated to form the 43rd Regiment of Foot, or the Black Watch. Now we formed up in Aberfeldy, and we officially started drilling in 1740. Now, the trouble begins as soon as men begin joining the regiment. Now, law has it that we should be signing our name to the legal documents in English or our spoken tongue. Many of the men are common men that do not speak English and only speak Gaelic. The instructions are not read to them, therefore they're signing a document they don't really understand. The second problem begins with the issue of clothing. We are promised 2 jackets, 2 shirts, 2 pairs of socks, 2 pairs of shoes, and to be issued weapons. The officers have decided to keep much of the money for themselves, and we're given 1 coat, 1 shirt, and the worst shoes that they can find. We're even told to carry our own weapons if we have them. Many of these weapons belong to our ancestors, and we shouldn't have to carry them in this army. But in 1743, we received news that we are to be reviewed in Edinburgh by a general. Now, many of us believe that we signed up to join this regiment to see service only in the Highlands. We have no idea why they want to take us south to Edinburgh. We marched to Edinburgh only to find that that general now wants to review us at Berwick. By the time we get to Berwick, we receive more news. This time that the King, George II, wants to view us in London. Not only are they taking us out of our Highlands, they're taking us to England and down to London. As we march south towards London, we pass many men of the Royal Scots, men like this, heading north. They're very sickly looking men, very yellow. Not like him, he doesn't look too sickly. Now these men have seen service in the West Indies. They're coming back and they're few and far between. Many of them have died of disease, of yellow fever. We believe that we're being sent south to London to be shipped overseas to see service in the West Indies. This is not what we signed up for. Our suspicions come true when we arrive in London to discover the king who is meant to review us isn't even in the country. He's in Germany. Now we know we're going to be sent to the West Indies. So 110 men, including myself, decide we're going home. If the army isn't willing to live up to its side of the contract, then we aren't either. We march north to Northamptonshire, where we take up residence in a small crop of trees, a perfect defensive position. And for about 24 hours we see 3 cavalry units bypass us. This was until Captain Ball was to come and speak to us. Eventually, under agreement with Captain Ball, we returned back to London, where we're forced to stand trial. We're waiting the results of that trial, and I believe that Captain Ball has that with him now.
Proclamation of court-martial and execution. It is the will of God and His Majesty George Augustus, King of Great Britain and Ireland, Duke of Brunswick-Luneburg, and Prince-Elector of the Holy Roman Empire, that on this day, the 7th of July, 1743, that it be known the outcome of court-martial of the mutineers, formerly of the 43rd Regiment of Foot. The Secretary of War, John Winnington, and the Lord Justices of Great Britain and Ireland had found guilty the 110 men of the as said Regiment of Highlanders, each being found guilty of treason, a crime punishable by death. The Secretary of War and Lord Justices have taken into consideration the acts of each individual as well as the physical and mental state of each man, and have pronounced sentence accordingly. Although treason is a low crime, punishable by death, His Majesty's wishes to show leniency. It is therefore granted that 26 men, being of weak body or mind, should be sent in military service, but not with the regiment, to Gibraltar and Majorca. 80 fellow mutineers will be sent to see service with His Majesty's Army in Georgia and the Leeward Islands. Peter MacGregor, alias McAlpine, alias Campbell, for deserting and exchanging his great belted plaid for small clothes, shall receive 1,000 lashes from the Cat of Nine Tails at 5 different times, 200 lashes each time. But for Corporal Samuel McPherson and Malcolm McPherson and Private Shaw, as leaders of the said mutiny, quiet please, their punishment should be greater. They have therefore been found guilty and sentenced to be shot by military firing squad.
I've changed my mind.
5 days from now, on the 12th of July, in the year of our Lord 1743, Corporals McPherson and Private Shaw shall be led to a place of execution within the walls of the Tower of London, where they will be shot by the Tower Guard on order of the Secretary of War. May God have mercy upon them. God save the King.
God save the King, yeah. So the poor Black Watch Regiment, when they signed up, they believed they were simply going to be guarding the glens of Scotland. Unfortunately, as you heard, they were actually moved down to London to be shipped abroad. They rebelled and decided to try and go back to Scotland. As you've learnt, they were captured and the so-called leaders were executed. But of course, the Black Watch soldiers were very different from the ordinary soldiers in the battlefield. They carried different kind of weapons. In fact, come forward here, Roy. Before we shoot you, we'll just get We've got a round wooden shield called a targe, covered in leather, heavily studded. They held behind the targe a long-bladed knife, which is called a dirk. Now, the dirk was held in the hand, concealed behind the shield, with the bottom end sticking out to cut towards their opponent's body in battle. Lastly, they had what we call the basket broadsword, excellent weapon for fighting on the battlefield. Now traditionally what a Highlander would do is he'd come onto the battlefield, discharge his musket and drop it to the ground. Disgraceful in the British Army, but they still did that. Then he rushes towards the enemy carrying these weapons. He pushes you off balance with the shield, cuts to your body with a dirk, then slices you down the middle with a sword and you fall into 2 bits. Now of course this is how the Highland regiments fought, but it's not how the rest of the Scottish regiments fight. We fight as all the regiments of the British Army with this. So I'm going to take a moment to show you the weapon of the British Army soldier in the 18th century. It's called the Brown Bess musket. 11 pounds 2 ounces in weight, a very heavy gun to carry around. I can show you what they fire from it. It's a lead bullet. Looks pretty horrific. In that form it looks harmless, but it was as deadly as a gun today. If the bullet hit you, it would make a very small entry wound about the size of your finger. But it's lead, so it flattens out an impact. So it makes an exit wound the size of your fist. So it's just as deadly as a gun today. For a soldier to fire it, he actually made up cartridges. And inside the cartridge at the top was the bullet. In the bottom there was gunpowder. He would take a cartridge out of the bag and bite the bottom of the cartridge. He then opened this bit here called the flash pan. Now this is where you get the phrase, a flash in the pan. You might have heard that before. You put some of the powder into the flash pan, close down the lid and trap the powder within. You then take the rest of the cartridge and place it into the barrel. It's got the remainder of the powder and the bullet. I'm not going to put it down there because I'll never get it back. Use this thing called the ramrod to push the cartridge down to the bottom. Then you replace the ramrod and the gun in theory was ready to fire. You pull back the hammer and squeeze the trigger. Held in here is a piece of flint. When the flint would come forward, it would knock the top of the pan open and cause a spark. That spark would ignite the powder within the pan, travel through a small hole to the powder in the barrel, and the gun went off. That doesn't seem complicated at all, does it? How many times did a soldier have to be able to fire this, sir?
3 to 4.
What do you mean once? 3 times a minute. And if we can't fire it 3 times a minute, what do we do to the Highlanders?
Encourage them with maybe 50 lashes of the whip.
Quite right too, sir.